previously indicated for ease of explanation, when the test results come out for how the person approaches the test, that test itself prints it as a percentage. And there's a really excellent scale for finding out if a person is exaggerating their symptoms of PTSD. It's called the atypical response scale. And the TSI-2 is the revised version of this test, and that scale was improved this time around to really try to be a clean indication of, is this person exaggerating? And it puts quite high questions in the test that are so unusual. They might sound like PTSD, but even the most severe cases of PTSD don't have these symptoms. And so somebody who's intentionally trying to exaggerate PTSD, or possibly unintentionally, but nonetheless, who's exaggerating it, is likely to endorse these items, even though they're not real PTSD symptoms. Ms. Heard scored so highly on this that even if there is, although Dr. Hughes correctly said, there tends to be a negative skew when people have the high levels of distress that's associated with PTSD, so sometimes people score higher on this even when they do have PTSD. She scored so high that that is effectively ruled out as a possibility.
Okay. What about Dr. Hughes's administration and use of the CAPS-5?
Okay, yes. So Dr. Hughes had diagnosed Ms. Heard with PTSD back in 2019 when she began testing her. It wasn't until 2 years later, more than 2 years later, 10 days after I administered the CAPS-5 to Ms. Heard, that Dr. Hughes held an impromptu evaluation session remotely with Ms. Heard and administered the CAPS-5. She had previously diagnosed PTSD without using what we consider to be the gold standard PTSD diagnostic interview.
Dr. Shannon Curry continues her testimony as we approach the top of the hour. We need to step aside and take a break. We want to thank Michelle Thomas for her time and expertise. More after this.
Bert, you won't phase me. Unlike your test, the Legro won't make you drowsy.
Alerts starts working 2 times faster than Claritin. For trees, you won't take me down. 1 hour to the tap. Take a Legro.
Before your symptoms take over you.
Towards your greatness.
Before I was diagnosed, there was nothing really to worry about. And then when I was diagnosed, there was just such a big weight on my shoulders. Every night I felt like maybe I won't wake up tomorrow. The hardest part of cancer is knowing that you have it.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital works day after day to find cures and save the lives of children with cancer and other life-threatening diseases.
You know, there are treatments that were invented within the walls of this hospital that have continued to improve the cure rates for pediatric cancer. And St. Jude's not going to stop until every single kid gets that chance to walk out in the doors of this hospital cancer-free.
If it weren't for St. Jude, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
This place has really shown us the strength of what can happen when so many people work together as one. People want to be a part of the cure.
Thanks to generous donors like you, families never receive a bill from St. Jude for treatment, travel, housing, or food, so they can focus on helping their child live. For just $19 a month, you'll help us continue the life-saving research and treatment these kids need. Join with your debit or credit card right now, and we'll send you this St. Jude t-shirt that you can proudly wear to show your support.
I think it's the most worthwhile place to put your money when it comes to childhood cancer.
Because it takes a heart for somebody to say that I'm willing to give to St. Jude so that they can help save more lives. That's huge.
Our giving to St. Jude is right up there with our mortgage. That's the priority that we put on giving to St. Jude.
Please, call or go online right now. Become a partner in hope today.
Hi, folks. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with a benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Millions of people have called the Medicare coverage helpline. Call, check your zip code, see if you're eligible, and get what you deserve. Call now.
Call 1-800-337-3200. That's 1-800-337-3200 now.
Aaron here from the Van Smith, and we're back with Omaze, and now's your chance to win your dream Sprinter van, including a full kitchen, a full-size bed, custom wood paneling, and tons of storage. And that's just the beginning. So hurry up and go to omaze.com/vansmith and enter now for your chance to win. Thank you for donating, and good luck.
Morgan never really thought about their credit scores until they got credit. Realized they could use their scores to open doors and help them pre-qualify for a place of their own with a perfect little roommate to match. Credit Karma. Download the free money app where your hard work pays off.
Welcome back to Sports TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins. Glad to have you along with us on this Wednesday. The final week of testimony in Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It is day 22 of testimony. Dr. Shannon Curry is back on the witness stand as an expert for Johnny Depp in his rebuttal. Well, let's go back into the courtroom, pick it up right where we left off.
Again, when we're doing a forensic evaluation, it is an important responsibility, and part of our ethics and professional standards are that we document everything to allow for transparency and full judicial scrutiny. And Dr. Hughes administered it incorrectly. She left huge sections, very relevant sections blank. There's no way to understand why she scored it as high as she did based on the information that's provided. You're essentially supposed to notate the examinee's responses as verbatim as possible to explain your reasoning applying their scoring procedure. It's a standardized test, and if you don't follow those standard procedures, it's completely invalid. Not only that, but it looks as though Dr. Hughes further invalidated it by trying to show that she had assessed for the childhood trauma impact, and she had said that she went back and asked the childhood question, but you can't do that. If you're assessing for two separate periods of one's life to find out the relatedness to PTSD, you do two separate CAPS interviews, period. You don't create your own question system. That is non-standard administration of the test, and it invalidates it.
All right. You also mentioned with respect to the PAI, or the Personality Assessment Inventory, that Dr. Hughes failed to mention some elements. What did she fail to mention?
Oh, okay. So on the personality assessment inventory, so first she failed to mention that there were clear indications of response distortion. She also failed to mention that Ms. Heard scored in her score profile against their main scores. She did elevate a score for the borderline personality disorder sort of section, but that in and of itself would not indicate a diagnosis. However, the configuration of her scores overall is consistent with that, and in fact, it's one of the diagnostic suggestions given by the test itself. And then also, there's a configuration around Ms. Heard's trauma responses on that particular test, which demonstrates that it is more likely that those symptoms were reported in relation to something in the distant childhood. It's more consistent with childhood chronic abuse than present circumstances or recent circumstances.
Okay, I think you said in addition to the issues with her own testing, Dr. Hughes misrepresented your results.
She did.
Can you tell us how?
So what I would say the main issue was that she said that Ms. Heard obtained a normal profile on my MMPI-2.
All right. How do you disagree with Dr. Hughes relative to the profile?
Okay, so the profile was not normal. So Ms. Heard already had subtle elevations just by the test by itself as it came out. There were subtle elevations, but they were elevations that if the validity scales hadn't been as elevated as they were, you might have said this person has some traits, but this isn't necessarily at the level of a true pathology. However, Ms. Heard elevated a scale that essentially is a defensiveness scale on this test. And when you're giving this test, you always are mindful of different norms or groups who may have similar profiles. And there's certain groups of litigants who tend to elevate this scale as well, so I had that in mind. However, Ms. Heard elevated this so much that it was far beyond the mean for the litigants that are known to have the highest levels of this scale, this defensiveness scale. And when this scale is elevated to the level that it is, you automatically understand that it is very likely that those clinical scales, I keep doing this because I'm seeing it in my head, it looks like sort of an ECT. It's sort of these peaks you see on a graph. And when you see these peaks, and you have this huge peak over here for the defensiveness scale, what you know is that these peaks are artificially, they've been lowered or suppressed based on the respondent being so defensive. They still detected what's likely there for her, but it's not as high as it should be. So you make an adjustment. And the recommendation is that anything at 60 or above, we call it a T-score of 60, or above is considered significant. Ms. Heard's were already over 60, some were quite higher than that. And then you see a very clear profile. And that was how I got that. I mentioned a 3-6 code type. Now, the test does its own correction also for some of the scores, but not the ones that are her main code type. With the test correction, she had a 1-3-6 code type, which is very similar.
What is a 3-6 code type?
A 3-6 code type is something that has been researched and found to be highly correlated or probabilistic of certain behavioral tendencies and personality traits. And the traits with a 3-6 code type tend to be marked by a lot of externalization of blame, a lot of denial about one's own personal faults, intentional or not intentional, but just extreme denial. Hostility that is strongly controlled and suppressed. The person may not even realize how hostile they are, but family members, those closest to them, are very likely to report that they lose their temper, and when they lose their temper, it explodes. We have sort of what we call a cookbook for these code types, which it will provide you with all the information that's been researched to be associated with them. And our cookbook actually states that 3-6 profile specifically tends to be associated with cruel and ruthless behavior, particularly to those who they perceive as less powerful than them and subordinates.
Describe for the jury the review process that you went through relative to the MMPI.
So I conducted a very methodical analysis of the scores. I do this for every test, and I also did it when I was reviewing Dr. Hughes' scores. So what you haven't seen that's in Discovery is that I created a 25-page outline just of her scores with, and it's sort of a table. So I'll put the score, I'll do it in sections so that I can understand different groupings, different research studies, and I start with looking at all the validity scales in the score. I put, and I'll even color the table to show me if it's kind of in the high zone, moderate zone, or low, and then if it's low, is it a significant low score, or is it just low so it doesn't mean anything? And then in the right side, I put all the research data that I found on this particular scale score. And so I start with the validity scales, the way the person approached the test. Then I go down to essentially, we call these the first factors. So their overall sense of well-being and how well they cope. On this, actually, Ms. Heard's, she endorsed scores or endorsed items that were the opposite of PTSD. So really saying that she feels free of distress and that she views herself very well. So then I go down to control, self-control, loss of control, coping abilities, and I put in the scores that are associated with that in the research and the test development. Then I go down to clinical and personality pathology, and I look at all the scores that are significant there. First with the top level main scores, then with all of the different sub-scores, again, citing the research, the meaning, the level of elevation, and what that means. And then I do comparison with different research groups. So for Ms. Heard, I did a section that looked at all sorts of different scores that have been implicated with a PTSD presentation to see if any of those were consistent. I can't remember how many there were. I think I put 13 on there, but I could be wrong. But I believe that there was only one that could even be, in some research, is sometimes associated with it, but it was general anxiety, which turned out to be more trait specific. I looked at the scores that are typical of women with IPV. Hers were not consistent at all with those. I looked at the scores that were consistent with people who are frequently in litigation. Hers actually were very highly correlated with those. That tends to be also consistent with a 3-6 code type. And the reason for that is believed to be that they tend to perceive themselves often as victims who need to avenge wrongs.
Were there other results you believe Dr. Hughes to have misrepresented? For instance, the TSI-2.
Yes. So Dr. Hughes generally said that testing supported PTSD and that there was an etiology for her trauma of intimate partner violence. She did reference that essentially I can't remember if she said that the trauma symptom inventory indicated PTSD, but she did say that the elevation on that validity scale is consistent with PTSD, and that's simply not true. That scale was designed and has been tested and shown to be there to show when somebody is endorsing extremely unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD. And even though when some people are experiencing PTSD, their distress level is so high that they'll engage in what we call a cry for help, and they may sometimes exaggerate distress. Again, when you're looking at scores as high as Ms. Heard's, and then you're not seeing indications of PTSD in the more subtle tests where she doesn't know what she's endorsing, it's good evidence that her over-endorsement on that one test is because of the reason the scale was made to detect exaggeration and feigning of symptoms.
Is this the test that resulted in the 98th percentile score?
Yes, on that score, on that atypical response scale.
And what does that 98th percentile score represent?
So that 98th percentile score just represents that among 98% of people who take that test would not have endorsed. She scored more of those unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD than 98% of people who have ever taken that test.
Does that relate to this concept you talked about before called feigning?
Yes.
What is feigning again?
Well, feigning is essentially exaggerating symptoms of a disorder.
Quick break, back with more testimony. It's Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, day 22.
Buckle your seatbelts, folks. A lot to cover tonight, like we do every night here on Closing Arguments. Things are heating up in the case against the Doomsday couple. What is the killer clown murder trial? New developments in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting. Shocking videos you have to see to believe. You will see the evidence. You will hear the arguments and ultimately.
Closing Arguments. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Core TV.
Mom, we're so glad you're feeling better. You gave us such a scare. I know, honey. Me too. But I want you to know I'm at peace with my homegoing when my time is up. And I'll tell you that I got coverage for my funeral so you and your brother would not have to worry about expenses. I didn't know you were saving money for your final expenses. I haven't. I called Open Care, and with one phone call, I was eligible for $30,000 for my funeral and final expenses. That's wonderful, Mom. But how did you pass your medical exam with your health condition? Oh, that's the best part. No medical exam is needed. That's right, and my rates can never increase, my benefits will not decrease, and my coverage will never be canceled. Mom, I'm so glad you called.
You can now get up to $30,000 in life insurance coverage to help pay for your funeral and other final expenses. There's no medical exam, and you can be enrolled with just one phone call. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. Call the number on your screen now and see how a final expense life insurance plan can help you. We don't want to leave our loved ones with debt. The cost of a funeral can be $8,000 or more. A final expense life insurance plan will pay up to $30,000, which can be used for funeral and other final expenses. Call 800-515-2863 now for your free information. You can now get up to $30,000 in life insurance coverage to help pay for your funeral and other final expenses. There's no medical exam, and you can be enrolled with just one phone call. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. Call the number on your screen now and see how a final expense life insurance plan can help you. There's no obligation. Call 800-515-2863. That's 800-515-2863.
You wanted 2 milks in your coffee, right?
1 milk.
Right. You know what? Consider subscribing. You did hire me as a junior scribe.
Oh, hey, do you want to take over? I'm just kidding. Never touch my computer.
Being undervalued is history. Search by major and salary at monster.com.
My world spins fast, but I wouldn't change a thing. I wear many hats: mother, daughter, and wife. Being a visiting angel is a big part of my life. I love providing the care that George needs now that he lives alone. Visiting angels gives me the confidence, work experience, and support to be the best caregiver possible. Visiting angels, America's choice of home care.
This is a tale of 2 kitties. This kitty uses ordinary litter. This kitty uses pretty litter, the world's smartest cat litter, and it's delivered right to your door. Its ultra-light, super absorbent formula traps odors, and it does something no ordinary clay litter can do. Pretty litter's color-changing crystals make it easy to monitor your cat's health, helping to avoid serious illness. She's switching to Pretty Litter. Smart move. Try Pretty Litter risk-free for 30 days. When you sign up, get free delivery. Go to prettylitter.com.
Still direct on the rebuttal case, the second appearance for Dr. Shannon Curry. Let's go back in, right where we left off.
I think the third thing you indicated you were going to talk about was self-reports and personal opinion as facts. What are you talking about there?
So in any science and in psychology specifically, it's really important that we use precise language and we say what we mean, and we do not present opinions as facts, because when you are in the role of an expert witness, or an expert in any setting, essentially a layperson may not be able to detect the difference between something that is a personal opinion that you're giving versus something that is substantiated by research data, test data, reliable test methods. So our ethics talk about, especially the specialty guidelines in forensic psychology, the responsibility we have to distinguish between data, then inferences we're making from that data, what the data can mean, sort of like those tables I do, right? But the data, the inferences based on the research, and then what my ultimate opinion is, integrating all of that data. And it's very important that we clarify that to the fact finder, to the judge, the jury. That's our responsibility, that we do not cloak personal opinions or the self-report of an examinee as an expert fact or somehow scientifically based when it is just a personal opinion or self-report of an examinee.
What do you mean by self-report?
The self-report is essentially what the examinee tells you during the interview.
Okay. When did Dr. Hughes do this most?
She did this most when describing instances of alleged IPV, and there's also an issue there because one of our ethics also discusses the importance of relevance and holding, essentially constraining our testimony to the data and not including private information, personal information that unnecessarily compromises the dignity of any of the litigants. She provided a lot of what was Ms. Heard's report to her, the allegations of abuse, when describing Mr. Depp, who she had not examined, when describing Mr. Depp's behavior, his motivations. I believe she used the word obsessive jealousy quite a few times, talked about Ms. Heard being in a highly dangerous situation. These are simply things that we cannot detect based on testing and a psychological evaluation. We have to evaluate the person, we have to get consent, and we can only describe an individual, not whether or not IPV is occurred. And we certainly shouldn't go into explicit details about sexual encounters or other things that are highly prejudicial, shocking, and hard to forget.
Dr. Hughes says that Ms. Heard has PTSD. Do you agree?
I do not.
Why not?
The results of my multi-method comprehensive evaluation based on carefully selected, researched, relevant test instruments, based on comparing those instruments to Ms. Heard's self-report, observing Ms. Heard's behavior over 12 direct hours of assessment, reviewing copious notes from prior therapists who indicated symptoms in their notes, reviewing the notes of Nurse Filati, previously Nurse Borum, who spent, I believe at one point, almost 2 months with Ms. Heard daily, reviewing the notes of her treating providers, all of the legal documents and discovery. There was no evidence of PTSD.
How is evidence of PTSD generally exhibited?
So really the bottom line in a forensic psychological evaluation is a change in functioning. That's what we're looking for. Again, I said we don't have a crystal ball. We're not wizards. We can't get into somebody's head. What we're looking for were there identifiable changes in the way the person engaged in their world. Were they able to keep a job? PTSD is an extremely disabling diagnosis. When a person has true PTSD, it is difficult for them to work. You'll see unemployment, job loss. It causes extreme levels of distress and impairment. There's divorce. There's isolation and estrangement from children, from family members. Extreme alcohol use, often a string of sudden DUIs when the person never had any before. They become homebound. They can't go to the store. They're certainly not going to events. They're not having success in their film career, usually. They're not exercising every day, pursuing their hobbies, being avid readers, obtaining level 3 sommelier training, having dinner parties with friends, speaking to public groups. Those are just indications of very high functioning. And when you're looking for a decrease in functioning over time, that is inconsistent with that decrease.
What about Dr. Hughes' suggestion that Mr. Waldman's statements served as a trigger for Ms. Heard's PTSD?
All right.
Yeah.
All right, excited about it. Slipping a commercial break here, and we'll have more from Dr. Johnny Depp right after this stories.
This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about Medicare Part C, commonly called Medicare Advantage. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans with additional benefits available that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. That's right, there are people on Medicare but don't have a Medicare Part C plan, which covers everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits in Medicare Part C. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent during the special enrollment period. You don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2022 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-279-5106. 800-279-5106. This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about Medicare Part C, commonly called Medicare Advantage. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans with additional benefits available that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. That's right, there are people on Medicare but don't have a Medicare Part C plan, which covers everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits in Medicare Part C. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent during this special enrollment period. You don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2022 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-279-5106. 800-279-5106.
This important message is for anyone 45 to 85 years of age. You can now get up to $25,000 for your funeral and other final expenses with guaranteed acceptance regardless of your health, starting at less than $1 a day.
My mom had a health scare recently. She's okay, but she's worried about making sure she has enough money for her funeral and final expenses. That can now be as much as $10,000.
Call now for a free quote and get up to $25,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, including your credit card debt, starting at less than $1 a day. Acceptance is guaranteed, regardless of your health. That's right. If you're between 45 and 85, call the Life Insurance Savings Group right now. Get up to $25,000 to cover your funeral and other final expenses for less than $1 a day. Just call the number on your screen right now for your free quote.
I don't want to leave my kids with a lot of bills to pay, but I'm concerned that with my health conditions, it'll be impossible to get approved.
Call the number on your screen now and see how the Life Insurance Savings Group can help you. There's no medical exam and no health questions. You can now be approved even if you have conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, or even if you are overweight. And your rates will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and your coverage cannot be canceled.
We like the idea of being covered, but we live on a pretty tight budget, and these plans all seem too expensive for us.
Don't worry. Plans start at less than $1 a day. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. You can get up to $25,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, and your acceptance is guaranteed, regardless of your health.
Call for your free quote today. Call 800-885-6363. That's 800-885-6363.
For the most of the morning, Kate Moss started the day for the Depp team, but she is taking the rest of it. Let's go back in after the sidebar concluded.
Dr. Houston suggested that perhaps Ms. Hurd's PTSD was somehow triggered. What's your view on that?
I would say that it can't be triggered if PTSD isn't present.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right, cross-examination.
Well, all right, what do you do with Dr. Hughes on cross? See how aggressive it is. Give me my attention, too.
I want to make sure that we all remember, you're not board certified, correct?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and you've been licensed for how long?
I've been licensed for 10 years.
Okay, and you are being paid by Mr. Depp's legal team to be here, correct?
Yes.
How much have you charged so far?
I actually don't know.
Over 100,000?
I truly don't know. I don't do my own books.
Over 200,000?
I don't know.
Over 300,000?
That would be way too much, but I do not know.
Okay.
Now, just so that we all remember, you had dinner at Mr. Depp's house for 3 to 4 hours with Mr. Depp, Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez, correct?
I was interviewed. I asked if there was anything I could eat because at about 3 hours I started to get hungry. Mr. Depp then offered to order takeout for the entire team.
So you had dinner at Mr. Depp's home with Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, Ms. Vasquez, and Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
And you had drinks as well, correct?
I actually don't know. I do remember that there were drinks.
Do you recall testifying earlier that you did have a drink, a mule something?
No, I remember testifying that there might have been a mule. A Moscow mule.
Okay, thank you. We didn't have animals there as well, right?
No animals.
Okay, that's good to know. And you talked about transparency. I just want to make sure, you had several designations, expert designations and reports in this case, correct?
Yes.
And in not one of them did you disclose that you had dinner and drinks at Mr. Depp's house for 3 to 4 hours with Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez. Is that correct?
Ms. Bedehoff, you're mischaracterizing what occurred.
Dr. Curry, please answer the question. Not once did you disclose this in any of your reports.
I did not disclose that I was interviewed as that standard procedure.
But it's true that you have never gone to a client's house to be interviewed for an expert witness position, correct?
Yes, because I never had a client that was essentially homebound because of their celebrity status.
All right. And you talked to Mr. Depp for 3 to 4 hours before taking on the role of assessing Ms. Heard and deciding whether she was suffering from any distress, correct?
I did not talk to Mr. Depp. I was talking to his legal team and he was there to observe.
He was present for the 3 to 4 hours? And are you saying now he just stayed silent and said nothing all day?
I don't recall what he did or didn't do. I was answering questions.
Okay. Now, your expertise here is limited to whether Amber Heard suffers from PTSD currently. Is that correct?
Yes, I was tasked with conducting an evaluation to determine Ms. Heard's mental status.
You know, very, very strict time limitations because we promised to get this case to the jury. So I really appreciate it if you just answer my question rather than trying to go further, okay? Thank you very much. Now, after you had the dinner, you then provided a designation in February of 2021 in which you said, and this is long before you ever saw Amber Heard, correct? You said that Amber Heard, quote, exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, end of quote, correct?
No.
No, we went through this before.
We did.
But, and that was on the designation, was it not?
I told you last time that I did not write that.
Okay, and you don't know who did on the legal team, correct?
No.
Okay, and then I also asked you, if you may recall, whether you listened to the audio recording in which Mr. Depp taunted Amber Heard that she had a borderline personality disorder. Do you recall that?
I recall you asking me that, yes.
Did you recall listening to that audio tape?
I don't recall Mr. Depp taunting Ms. Heard. I do recall that he at some point suggested she might have that diagnosis.
Okay, and that was back in these audio tapes back when they were together, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've never before been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to someone who has bipolar disorder, correct?
No, as I previously stated, that's not true.
All right. Not up here anymore. Okay. My apologies, but I'm going to go again.
Your Honor, can we approach it?
All right.
Sidebar, let's get right in. More from Shannon Curry, the cross-examination of expert witness next.